Thank everybody for jumping on another interview with one of our local legends. I want to first off
What are you talking
thank.
about?
Yeah, Greg is probably the most humbled local legend you're ever going to meet, and it's so fun to have interaction with him in this like this because it kind of forces him into a corner, and I love that. So I got to thank the production of these interviews. I got to thank the young leaders of Miami County, supported by the Troy, Piqua, and Tip City chambers. Shelby, thank you so much for getting these things arranged and making sure they go off without a hitch. Through this interview, obviously, if there's questions, you can raise your hand, you can ask questions, and Shelby will take care of those things, make sure they're addressed, or you can sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride here. That leads me into my introduction and then also into Greg's introduction. So again, my name is Justin Coby. I'm the Executive Director of Health Partners Free Clinic. I serve on the Young Leaders Board and have the honor of interviewing these local legends, these local leaders that can end up being the shoulders that we all stand on as younger entrepreneurs. So I want to thank today's guest, Greg Taylor, for stepping in on this interview session. Greg Taylor, we were kind of talking about it before the interview. Everybody got on the Zoom interview, but Greg Taylor is a man of many talents, and he would tell you probably that he just says yes to things and figures them out as he goes. But in order to do that, you have to have an open heart, and that's hands down that's something that Greg Taylor has. I want to share one story I have about Greg Taylor before I formally have you say hello. I remember Greg, I think it's back in 2013. I was at First Place. First United has their separate facility called First Place. And there was a guy in the back running the IT. And I was sitting with some other nonprofit folks and looked back and I said, who's that tall drink of water back there playing around with all the wiring and the soundboards? Like, oh, it's Greg Taylor. That's Jim's son, Greg Taylor. And I said, okay, should I know him? They said, oh yeah, you should know him. So that was my first introduction to this guy lurking in the background and making sure things work. But Greg, thank you for being on.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate all those kind words. No, I got to live up to them, so it's a challenge.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was with our church. I did some volunteering with the church, and at that time I was helping I was the backup soundboard guy, and so you might have got a little bit of static, but hopefully I did an okay job. But I appreciate that.
Yeah, you did a great job, and it was actually an event that was helping. It was a learning experience for nonprofits. So yes. I think you're wearing a couple hats in the same moment, even. Yeah. But so I want you to just back up for a second before we get into your accolades here, and tell me about your history with Troy. How long have you lived in Troy, and did you grow up in Troy?
Right. So we moved here. Our family moved here in 1977. So my father worked for a Ford Motor Company in Detroit, and he had a position with Ford, and he had an opportunity to get into the dealership program, dealer development program, and that led him to purchase what was then called Donaldson Ford. Yeah, it was Don Doria Ford and Donaldson Ford, and then in 1977 he had the opportunity to purchase that company and called it Troy Ford. So we've been here since 77. So for me, that was the fourth grade. So fourth grade, we moved here, and you know, I was a Hook Pirate, so I went to Hook School, lived out in Westbrook, grew up in Westbrook. So Westbrook's an amazing community still, right? I mean, it's still one of the hot places in Troy to live. So, yeah. And like any, you know, go through the Troy system, probably like a lot of people, I was excited to move away. And I did that, and then I quickly realized, well, you know, Troy's not such a bad place to raise a family, right? I think a lot of people will come to that realization, and I did, and after a couple stints at a couple different companies, I worked for the Ohio EPA for a while, and then after being Ohio EPA, moved back to Troy, got married, started having kids, and got into the family business. So that's when I started at Troy Ford. Was in about I think the year 1999, 2000 when I started there. with my father, got into the family business.
So what was interesting, what you said there was that he was working for the Ford Motor Company, and this program obviously was to send him out to a dealership to help them, but instead he comes in and buys them out.
Yeah, you know, it's through the dealer program. What Ford did, they mentored some of their young executives and business people, and he had called on this deal. They call it calling. He had called on Donaldson Ford as a place he would go. He did what's called wholesale. So he'd go, and we still do that. So Ford Motor Company has representatives that go to the Ford dealerships, Chevy, GM, they all do this and say, hey, I have, 200 Explorers I need to find a home for. They said, hey, Mr. Dealership, will you take X amount? And they go to another dealership, will you take X amount? They wholesale it out to the dealers. My dad did that. And this was the dealership, actually the only dealership he actually got kicked out of. So something went south between him and what was in the dealer principal. He gets kicked out of the place. The guy says, get out. He does. Yeah. And then years later, he ends up being the person to buy it. So it's a great story that he bought the place, the only place he got kicked out of, he ended up purchasing through that program, through that dealer development program. So
yeah, so that's interesting. You started before you started at Troy Ford, you worked for the EPA. Did you have a background and an interest in the environment, or what?
So I have a civil environmental engineering degree, and through University of Cincinnati, and so through the EPA, worked for the Division of Solid and Infectious Waste. So I did landfill inspections. I'd go to landfills, and it's a very interesting industry, landfills. And so I go to landfills, and there are mountains of regulations landfills have to comply with, and you go out and do those inspections. So I did that for about 5 years at the EPA, and I sort of peaked out of where I wanted to be there, and I didn't want to go to management, and that sort of led me to move back home and get into because of getting married, having kids, to get into the family business.
Yeah. So you say 99, 2000, you started in the family business. Yeah. There's a lot of family businesses all around the country. I've been in a position where I have done business with family, and it's really hard. Okay. Mm-hmm. So discuss with me, and with all of us, if you will, how that worked. Did you and your dad just click right away, and you just had some way of professionally interacting that was solid, or did you have to work at that over time?
We didn't have that friction maybe that you're referring to. It really didn't have that. So when I came in, the business had been there for 20 years. I was there for the last 20 just about. So I came about halfway through because, of course, he sold it last year. And so by that time, it's well established. It's running very well. The 20 years I was there, the auto industry had the biggest growth ever. And I don't think it was because of me, but I was there during that time. And so that was exciting. So, from 1999 to the year 2020, it's huge growth in the auto industry. And, so I come in at a pretty, the business is up. So when business is up, and things generally go well. And I was fortunate to be there during those times. And yeah, we got, there was no friction. I did a lot of things that maybe my dad at the time couldn't handle, which is electronics. So we got into, the internet's coming online at that time, right? So this is about the time, the boom of the internet, and I had experience there. So I handled a lot of that side of the business, to which, he's being a little older than I was. He was not as fluent in that as I was at the time. So I came in at a good time.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question. What did you implement while you were there? So you would say primarily it was the technology end.
Yeah, the technology, bringing the company up to speed with technology. I mean, I remember when I got there, the dealership didn't have a modem. I mean, there's no way to communicate. And so I remember we'd buy computers, put modems in them. And if people remember AOL, the sounds your computers used to make when you dialed in, right, to CompuServer, AOL, or the internet. And so, I'd start putting modems on the computers and upgrading the computers. And so my real job was used car management. I was responsible for purchasing used cars, selling used cars. But in the back end, I did a lot of the technology stuff to get us ready for the next 20 years. So, and now it's, and what's happened, it moved faster than I did. So now it's at the point when we sold last year, it's just, you have to have somebody that's their profession just about to handle the internet side of things in the car business and a lot of businesses, right? You got to have somebody that specializes in that to take care of that sector of your company.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, advertising has changed entirely. That if you don't understand the digital end of advertising and geofencing and all these crazy things, then you're kind of left in the dust. How about, so you're talking about the technology of doing business, but what about the technology of the cars? Was that something that you saw other employees at the car lot that were like, whoa, this is just a little too much, too fast?
Yeah, it's still, it's a challenge maybe in a lot of industries, but in the car industry, the amount of technology in these vehicles now, and you've got salespeople that have to be smarter than the general public that comes in, and that's a challenge because you've got to know everything about every vehicle, and you've got 20 different vehicles out there. Yourself, if you're looking for a vehicle online, you've researched it to the tilt, right? I mean, every button, everything about that vehicle, and you're an expert on that vehicle you want to buy. And so it was a huge challenge to keep your staff up to date on all the innovations in the vehicles, because every year new things come out. I mean, this year Ford has come out the Mach-E, which is electric vehicle, all electric. And so I'm not there, but I can imagine the amount of training they're having to do to educate consumers on this brand new all electric vehicle with brand new computer systems. It's self-driving.
Right.
So to stay on top of that it's a challenge.
Were you a part of creating that continuing education for the staff, or was this something that was already implemented, or how did you hear that?
In charge of maybe coordinating it. Ford Motor Company has a great program where they have a lot of online and in-person training. And so there's a portal you go to make sure all your staff is up to date and all the training modules. And so I make sure that's being done. But the training itself was done by Ford.
Okay. That's a nice little support to have. That's for sure. Okay. So now you're at Troy Ford, and that's when, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's during that time you start moving in towards the nonprofit world and giving time back. I know that's I know your dad. He was a board member for Health Partners, and I also know that he has instilled in him and obviously in you to give back.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what inspired you to get involved in the work that you have? And can you go through? I know we were just doing this before the interview, but can you go through and off the top of your head and name off all the different organizations you've either sat as a board or advisory committee for?
I can do that because I listed them.
Oh, hey, he did his homework.
Otherwise,
all right.
No. So yeah, but back to getting involved in the community. After I'd been at the dealership for a couple of years, the success of that company and a lot of local companies is the community. I mean, Dad didn't have the success he would not have had the success he had there if it wasn't for the support of Miami Valley, specifically Troy, Miami County, then further out. And so that success is a lot due to the community. And we're in an amazing, that, and people on this call hopefully know that, the amazing community we're fortunate to have here in Troy, Miami County. And so you see that, and you see the business doing well, and you see the support of the people coming in, purchasing cars, purchasing parts, purchasing service. And so you want to be involved with the community to give back, like you said. And so, that was instilled in me. That is, they support us, we're going to support them. My first adventure, and I shared with you, was through the Troy Chamber of Commerce. So at that time, there's a lady named Maria Arriga at the Troy Chamber. We did a new car show inside Hobart Arena. We did actually for 3 or 4 years, coordinate with Ken Seiler, who's in charge of it now. So we would, between icings, when there's not ice on the floor, obviously, each dealership would bring in 10 to 12 cars you would have GM, Ford, Chevy, Chrysler, Jeep. We'd all bring in cars and have a new car show, put a balloon, to put down the red carpet. It's a really neat event. It was well attended for a few years. So after the first year I coordinated that, the chamber saw it, and Maria Riga at the time was the executive director. She saw that and kind of got me into the chamber, saying, all right, hey, you pulled this off, let's get you in the chamber. And so that's what started it. And so once I was in the chamber, I don't know what happened next, but I think it was actually United Way. And at that time, amazing lady named Lucy DeSavo, who I know who since has passed on, but Justin knows. So Lucy, some point along the line, I can't remember where I met Lucy, and Lucy said, hey, we'd love to have you in United Way. So, okay, great. And once you get on the United Way board, amazing things you learn about the community, because now you're touching 25 other nonprofits you learn about, and you see what they're doing in the community, and you meet all their executive directors, such as Justin. And so I was on United Way for many years, and enough that we, through Lucy, through Richard Bender, and I've not been on there for a couple of years, and now they're, of course, it's United Way in Miami County, and not just Troy.
Yeah.
But it's some, and United Way was my connection to the soup kitchen. So I've been fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. So one of the things you do on the United Way board, as you know, is you go visit the member agency. So my assignment was a soup kitchen. I had not met Dick Steinman maybe barely before then. So I go to the soup kitchen, interview Dick Steinman, say, Dick Steinman, your organization's asking for X amount of money. United Way is going to fund that. Tell me more about your organization, more about the soup kitchen. The soup kitchen had been around for many, many years, and I didn't know much about it. So I go talk to Dick, and I had an amazing conversation. And if Dick truly is one of the pillars of the community, for those that don't know Mr. Steinman.
I always refer to him as kind of like a living saint. You really don't meet guys like him, guys or gals like him often.
You do not meet guys like him often, and he's one of those guys where you want to have in your circle. And I knew that right away. I thought, this is a gentleman that if I can be involved with, I'm going to. And so what that led to, he asked me to be on the board. So I get on the soup kitchen board, and about a year after that, maybe 2 years after that, ITW, which was Hobart / ITW, comes to Dick and say, hey, Dick, we want to give you a lot of money, build a new building. And so we've called board meeting. We said, oh, that's amazing, awesome, thanks, God bless. And so then I get directly involved with building the new soup kitchen. So again, right place, right time. And so Dick and I and the board are heavily involved with building the new soup kitchen. So
now I heard a story about that.
Okay.
So if you don't know Dick Steineman, he's a guy I like to interview here, but I think it would be, Dick doesn't do a lot of the social norms when it comes to communication. So he was, I remember when I first met him, he's filling his grant applications out by pencil. Yeah. You couldn't email Dick. I think he's the last person in the city to have a flip phone. He still has a flip phone. It's got to be 20 years old, but he pulls up the antenna. Right. And he drives this beat up car. But that is truly, he's like a monk. He gives all of himself to the community. It doesn't bother him one bit. But I heard the story I heard about this was that he got a random phone call one day from ITW, and they basically said, hey, you can expect some money coming to you, but never really told him what he was going to get.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. And it was like a significant amount of money, of course, that allowed us to, it was enough money, a seed money, where we actually had to go out and raise more money to build the building. But they were generous enough that it started it. And it's an amazing facility. Those who haven't visited St. Pat's Soup Kitchen, it's an amazing facility. And to have that type of facility in our community is unheard of. It's a town the size of Troy, 25,000 people, and we've got a state-of-the-art soup kitchen. I like to call it community kitchen. Because rarely do they serve soup, actually. To have that facility is amazing, and it serves the community. Not only, obviously, we serve every day at 5 o'clock for those who need a meal, but it serves the community in other ways. There are meeting rooms there. Other nonprofits have used, maybe Health Partners has used one in the past.
Oh yeah, so we do, before COVID-19, we were doing outreach screenings once a month. We'd go in there, and then we did a 4-week diabetes training session. Where we overlapped it with dinner, so that if there were folks within there in the kitchen that wanted to also learn about good nutrition for diabetes, they could have that available to them at no cost. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing for this community, and you're right, state of the art. I love taking students over there and saying, hey, this is our soup kitchen. This is our kitchen here for the folks in need, and they're blown away. A restaurant level facility.
Oh, it is, yeah. And again, I always like to give kudos to ITW. Actually, the ITW Food Equipment Group, who did a lot of that for us. And I don't, but I don't know how much the community knows what ITW does for this community. They're a huge United Way. A large portion of the money raised by United Way comes through ITW Hobart, and so they're a huge community supporter. And I always like to make sure people know how important they are to the community, how important they were to the soup kitchen.
Add to that, they'll double match a donation given by an employee, whether current or retired.
Yeah.
If they volunteer, a current employee volunteers at a nonprofit, they'll pay them the wages to volunteer, and it goes straight to the nonprofit. I mean, they're just, I wish every company had their culture. It's
Exactly.
amazing.
Oh, yeah. And what they do for us is amazing. So yeah, you're right about that. It'd be a different world if everybody had their culture and had the generosity that they do.
That's right. You know, one thing that listening to you talk about, well, I did this, and then I kind of rolled into that, and then I got sought out for this. We were talking prior to getting on here today, and it's like, if you're young, you're full of energy, and somebody finds out you're willing to do something for nonprofits, it's like the floodgates open. Everybody wants to get their claws in you. And I had mentioned, and this definitely goes for me, it usually rarely has anything to do with your skills or talents, but more about your energy and your heart. And so I think that is point on with what happened to you. Is you got in there, they knew you'd work hard, and you have a great heart, and you got absorbed in it. Was there any nonprofit you volunteered for? I shouldn't ask this question. Were there any projects you got involved in and you were like, this is way over my head, I shouldn't have said yes to this?
There has been some chamber thing. I mean, and this is sponsored by the chamber. And
there you go.
There was a membership drive. We had a membership drive in the chamber a year or two ago, and I got involved in it. And and it was a very successful membership drive. They had a gentleman come in, and I was supposed to get a team together. I said, all right. So I don't know who called me from the chamber. I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I was supposed to get this team together, and we're going to go out and get members. And I dropped the ball. I overcommitted myself. I didn't have the time to get my team together. Maybe you're on one of the teams, Justin, to get my team together to go out and raise and get new members. And so I've always felt a little bad about that, but I've been forgiven. So I
got roped in on a team, and I gave that guy who roped me in crap about it for probably a solid year.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at least
support the chamber, Shelby. Yeah. I hear you. We support, but it's that was intense. I remember that process. It was intense. Yeah. So through your okay. So now we've talked about some of that nonprofit. I know that through your career, you've started a couple of businesses and kind of got this entrepreneurial thing. So you're a civil engineer by trade, right? So you have this very, would you say you're an engineer's engineer, or are you someone who can socialize? I think civil engineers seem more sociable.
Well, I'm not an engineer anymore, obviously. I've not used that profession in a long time.
Yeah.
But that I learned a lot from that allowed me to, it opened a lot of doors, having that skill set and having that degree opened a lot of doors. But maybe it's the social skills which have opened just as many. Being able to work with people, talk with people, and that led to, I don't know if that leads to or not, but starting the entrepreneur spirit. So yeah, I've always had a entrepreneur spirit. We've started several companies, and they've done well, and I've sold them, and I don't know, it's always like I'm going to the next thing.
Yeah. What are some of those companies in this community that you've been a part of starting and are still?
One a lot of people know, and the first one we had was called Rented Jumpy. We rented inflatables.
Yeah.
And then that led to what's called Jumpy's Fun Zone, which is still in Troy. I sold it years and years ago, but we had a very, very successful run at Family Entertainment Center.
Yeah.
From Rented Jumpy, we had a manager who was amazing, and she said, I see an opportunity here to do a family and bring these inflatables indoor. I'm in the car business, and I'm doing this on the side, and so she's really running everything. So we had opportunity to rent a space there where it's still there, and did a family entertainment center, and I had a blast with it. It did well, and I had opportunity to move on, do something else, and so we sold it, and
how did you get involved in that? So were you renting jumpies for the car lot, and then you're like, how that
started was church. So I attended First United Methodist Church in downtown Troy, and at that time they had rented a church for a carnival, and the inflatables that were delivered were just nasty. They're wet, they're moldy, they're just terrible. It's one of those things. Me and a couple of buddies, but this is awful. So we thought we can do this better. We did it better, and we did very well. We sold that to another inflatable company. And then when we sold that, that's when we started the indoor company. and that grew to, we I won't talk too much about it, but we're next to the Dollar Tree and the pet store, like by Fazoli's in Troy. I don't know what's there. There's some pet store there now, but we were inside that place for Jumpy's was for a couple of years, and then it moved to its permanent location behind McDonald's. So.
Yeah, I tell you, I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they absolutely love going still. So we'll if on a rainy weekend we'll go over there, and I will inevitably beat the pants off of them in every video game that I can to make myself feel like a big man. But no, they love that space.
Yeah,
they really do.
It's a neat place. It's like I call it Kitty Vegas. All these arcade games you go and get tickets, and it really is. It's a neat, and I don't know who the current owner is, but I know they're doing well, so I'm excited for them. Hopefully that continues.
So what was the next project after Jumpy's?
Recently, actually, it's been commercial real estate. So we've bought a couple properties and renovating some properties in Troy. And then most recently has been Hayner Distilling. So that's ramping up. That's taken up a lot of our time right now, is bringing back Hayner whiskey, Hayner bourbon to the community.
Well, let's talk about that since you brought it up. I mean, this is so. I have to imagine everybody who's listening in understands the significance of Hayner, but if you don't know about Hayner whiskey and Hayner Distilling, it was the big H's that built Troy. The first one was Hayner, and then you had Hobart. Well, Hayner distilled whiskey, and then during Prohibition, they sold tonics through the mail. Is that correct, Greg? Yeah. So that's how they survived. And then did they ever come back after Prohibition?
No. So Prohibition comes along in 1920, and what I'm surprised. First of all, I don't know if the people watching this I'm finding about 50% of the people even know the history of Hayner in Troy. If you tell somebody in Troy, say, where does Hayner come from? About half of the people even know that was their start. The history is the largest distillery in Troy. They ended up being the largest mail order whiskey company in the United States. And so at that time, what they were doing is they had this a young entrepreneur gentleman who was running Hayner. William Kidder was his name, and he saw the opportunity to ship whiskey through the mail to dry counties. So in early 1900s, 1915, Prohibition 1920, but even before then, parts of the country were going dry. That just means, it doesn't mean you couldn't drink whiskey in your city. It just means it wasn't going to be distilled. So if a town in Kentucky goes dry, what the Hayner would do, they would go to that town, they would buy up advertising space in all the newspapers and say, hey, you can order from us. Although you can't buy it in your town, you can't distill it in your town, you can still drink it. It was legal to drink it, you just couldn't make it. And so Hayner became hugely popular. They had distribution points all over the United States of mail order whiskey. They took out all these advertisements, and it was all made in Troy, bottled in Troy, and shipped all over the country. Largest in the United States, just out of Troy. And at one point, they're the largest distillery in Troy. In the original distillery is actually right next to Overfield Tavern. So you got the soup kitchen in one corner, Overfield Tavern. You look to the right of Overfield, that building, which doesn't look like it's distillery now because it's been added on to obviously a lot, but the original brick house distillery is still there. You go back in there, and Dick Steinman owns the building actually, and he's taking me back in there. You can see sort of the layout of the original distillery from the early. It started in 1866 is when it started.
Wow.
1866, and then Prohibition comes along. 1920s when they closed, and so we saw opportunity to bring it back. So we're close.
Why? Okay, so history aside, pretty cool history, fair enough. But what motivated you to reincarnate this piece of the history? Do you have a background in understanding and distilling? Is there somebody else you brought in who has that kind of background?
Right.
Explain that.
So what started it was really just an interest in the bourbon industry and the whiskey industry. Me and a group of friends had finished what's called the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky. So in Kentucky, they have what's called the Bourbon Trail, right? You go, you visit these 10 different distilleries, and you get your little passport book stamped. At the end of it, you get a T-shirt. So we had just a great time learning about the industry. And it was not about going down there drinking and getting drunk. That's not part of it. It's really, really neat product. the history of whiskey, the history of bourbon is amazing in this country. And so you learn all, you go these, you know, these distilleries are 200 years old. You're going these huge, these old distilleries, and they refurbished them, and they're making this amazing product. And you know, so we finished the Bourbon Trail. I'm at Hayner, the Hayner Cultural Center one day. Actually, my daughter's taking an art class there, and I knew about Hayner. I knew about the history, but then within the Cultural Center, of course, they have a room dedicated to the history of Hayner Distilling. I had not been there before, so I go in there and look around, and oh, this is amazing, you know. And you learn the history of Hayner. You learn what they did to the community. They're very generous to the community. They, of course,
that's that little back room, correct? Yeah. Off of there's a bigger kind of community room on the first floor, and then you sneak back there, and there's okay.
Yeah, there's a whole room. It's got the history of Hayner, all the bottles. So I saw that, and I thought, how amazing would that be? Is if we could resurrect this and bring back Hayner Distilling. So we went through the proper channels, through the trademark, through the businesses, and so we've got all our permits in place, and we're in. A lot of we want to share with people. Of course, we're gonna have a great product, but just the history. I think it's neat to share with everybody the history of Hayner, and that ties in so much of the history of Troy, to let people know about what used to be, you know, well before all of us. So absolutely, it built a lot of this town.
Wow, so it's kind of like this distillery / museum, and bringing old and new world together.
Yeah.
Concept. Now, you made a comment here, and this sounds like minutia, but I want to bring this up. You said we went through all the proper channels, we trademarked. So did you trademark that on the national level? It's a national trademark so that no one else can have it?
Yeah, trademark the word Hayner as it relates to spirituous liquor. So, you know, Hayner, it exists in a lot of different variations, but as it relates to liquors, now it belongs to us. Right. And so, yeah, then you of course have to register the business, and there is amazing amount of permits and requirements through the federal side, to the state side, to be a distillery. So we're going to, by law, we have to distill, and we do have a small still. We will distill, but we're really going to do what's called sourcing. So we will buy barrels of whiskey already pre-aged and distilled someplace else, and we'll buy those barrels, bring them to our place. We'll blend them together to our special recipe, and then we'll bottle it.
Got it.
But we have to distill some, so we do have a distillery, but 99% of our product is going to be what we purchase from another distillery. And that's very common. I don't know if people know this. When you go down the bourbon aisle or the whiskey aisle at your state store, at least half the stuff you look at is actually made by somebody else. For example, Bullet. Bullet's a huge, well-known national name. Up until last year, they didn't make their own whiskey. It was made by a company called MGP, which is a company in Indiana that we're actually going to buy from also.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. So I did not know that. I was not aware of that. And I always thought to myself, like, how can you just start a whiskey distillery?
Yeah.
Because if you're a connoisseur, you like your whiskey, you like bourbons, you like scotch, typically they're going to be aged. So you got to let them sit around. So obviously the industry answered that issue.
Yep. And so we will buy aged 2 to 3 to 4 year old whiskey and bourbon. I will also buy, there's whole commodities of whiskeys we're learning. So, you know, 1 year barrel is obviously much cheaper than a 4 year barrel. So what you do is when you get into the business, you buy some 3 and 4 year barrels that you bottle now, but you also buy a bunch of 1 year old barrels, which you know you're going to bottle 4 years down the road. Because you know, 1 year old barrels, you know, is a quarter of the cost of 4 years because you know they've got time value in that barrel sitting in their warehouse, right? And so you're paying for that. And so, you know, we'll buy 4 in 1, and the 1 year old barrel they'll keep in their warehouse, and then 4 years from now we'll go grab it, bring it, and bottle it.
Wow,
So we're sort of expression we like is we're building the plane as we fly. So figuring some of this out as we go along.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate. We've had people help us out. A lot of it you just sort of figure it out.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question that I actually asked Missy Dewar as well from Indian Creek. Do you think the trends in microbrewing have just been explosive? And I'd always thought, geez, wouldn't it make sense if some of that community kind of overflowed into the whiskeys, into visiting distilleries? Do you feel like that was kind of part of your foray into looking into distilleries, looking into the bourbon trail, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So what happened actually in a legislature level, so microbreweries, they have a great lobby group, and they've got you can open a microbrewery pretty easy and sell your own beer pretty easy, and it's not like you have to go out and we get into liquor laws here. A lot of the liquor permits are there's a limited number of them. So in our town of Troy, we I don't know what it is. We say we have 30 liquor permits. A lot of times those are already taken. But if you open a microbrewery, you don't have to have one of those 30 that are already taken by other people. You get your own. And so you're able to open a microbrewery and sell beer without waiting in line to get one of these permits. There's only so many permits per population, and they're often taken because they're valuable. And so what's happened, you know, that's why the explosion of microbreweries happened, because the state saw an opportunity to help businesses. It was really, they saw that and they put it in the revised code that you don't have to have one of these other permits. You get your own special ones. You can serve your own beer. And so that explosion led to the micro distillery, and then they ended up doing the same thing in micro distilleries. So as a micro distillery, we can get a permit which is not controlled by the 30 that are available. We just get a special one because we're investing in the state. We're a small business, and the state wants to incentivize that and encourage small businesses. And so that's why breweries and distilleries have exploded recently. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
it does. Actually, it's a comment that is a comment that Missy had made, that in 2007 there was some legislation that occurred that drove her into the industry. So that must be what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you've had all these entrepreneurial endeavors under your belt, and we've heard some of the success stories. Would you be willing to share one of the failures, one of the flops or a project you got in and just got so frustrated with that you just had to walk away?
Oh goodness. Not had the frustration often is maybe not the failure of them. It's maybe probably the regulations and all these different aspects from you think about inflatables. Well, it's an inflatable in someone's backyard. Inflatables are regulated by the same guy who would inspect the Beast roller coaster at Kings Island was the same guy who would come out and inspect our $1,000 blow up.
Wow.
And so you had to follow all these regulations. It's by the Ohio Amusement Ride Association or something. And so it's challenging for a small business to follow all these regs, right? That is, and that goes from the indoor place was also licensed. Even laser tag is licensed by the state. Sometimes I want to say just no tax, but I'm not going to say that. But the state does licensing. But having said that, I also want to make sure I say the state does amazing things for companies, and such as I mentioned the micro distillery, microbrewery laws, which are pro business,
right?
And of course, opening a distillery, we're literally building the plane as we fly here, because you keep learning new things you have to comply with. So but that's the biggest thing for any organization. And talking to you, I can imagine the regulations that you deal with daily, which would make my mind seem trivial, probably.
No, I think it happens very similarly in any industry that you get involved in. What would be, having said, and yes, I agree. I think that it's frustrating, and you feel like you get your hands tied at times. What would your advice be for an entrepreneur that's looking into an industry that they know is going to be regulated and it's going to bring regulation, and they're kind of going through this analysis paralysis thing?
For young entrepreneurs, biggest thing is to be patient, and be patient and budgeting. Whatever you think it's going to cost, double it. In starting businesses, I can tell you that right now we're renovating a apartment. We're actually building 3 apartments at downtown Troy and Plum Street. Bought this 100-year-old building, and another company called MVP, which I'm partners in, bought this 100-year-old building, and we're renovating the apartments. We had a budget, and we're beyond that. So what everything's going to cost, you might as well double it, because that's the way things are. And we talked at the beginning about with the pandemic and COVID going on, when you talk about we're seeing a lot of people start new businesses because either maybe they've been laid off, they want to go out on their own, it's a good time to do it, I believe, because the normal is gone. What's normal anymore? I mean, the normal business, the brick and mortar stores are struggling. Obviously with stuff moving online, it opens opportunities for anybody to do those sort of things. Another building that we have, MVP has, is called the Troy Sunshade Building. It's a building up between Plum and Lincoln. And we've got the whole building rented out to a lot of young entrepreneurs, from photography studios to the clay studio. There's Noah Walkup, who owns, he's a great success story in our community, who owns Purebred Coffee. He's in our building. He's a young entrepreneur, started his own coffee business. And so we see a lot of people coming to us wanting space because they want to start their own business. And that's something that we're also looking to find more buildings in Troy we can renovate to offer, because we know there's demand for these companies, for these startup companies coming along. But advice is be patient, double your cost. But you've got to be passionate about it. Whatever you do, you got to be passionate about it, because it's hard. And it's no fun doing something that's hard to do if you're not passionate about it. I mean, why would you do that? Right? So you got to be passionate about whatever you choose to do. It's okay, and you'll be successful in the end. Yeah,
that's the truth. You had brought up, you touched on something that I just wanted to hit right. Before we end here this interview, this is a scary time for entrepreneurs. I'd have to say there's a lot of unknowns and unknowable to come in the next 6 to 12 months. I think you kind of gave us your response, but what would also be your advice to someone who's never done it before? I mean, they're just starting their very first business in this kind of environment.
Again, I think it's a perfect time for innovation, because there's no normal anymore in business, I don't believe. And so it's a perfect time to go out there and put yourself out there. And if you're passionate about it, the opportunity is there to do something different. I think people are looking for that. I think people are looking for local things. And so likely you're not going to start a business in Troy, and you're not going to go nationwide, in the first year, right? I mean, you're going to start local. We're in a community that supports local. I've seen it at Troy Ford. I see it in the nonprofits I'm involved in, how much this community supports local efforts. And so it's a good place to do it. I can't imagine starting a business anyplace else, other than Miami County. We've got, I'll speak positively, of course, to our city departments. I've worked with the city departments quite a bit, and they're easy to get along with. They're easy to work with. They'll help you out. The health department, I had an interaction just today with the health department. We didn't do something quite right. I got them on the phone. They said, all right, here's what you need to do to fix it. They didn't try to bust us on this. They just said, let's get this done. Let's make it right. And we're going to do that. And so, having those relationships in a small community is important. And the small community that wants to help each other is important.
Well, you're absolutely right. And there's, I think we're both a little biased, but I just don't see, when I'm going out of our community, I don't see communities that are quite so tight knit. So you're absolutely right. I've got one final question to end the interview, and I always leave this as a surprise question. But if you had a billboard on I-75, and you could put one word on it you wanted everybody to read every day, what would that one word be?
Oh, wow. One word, I-75, we drive. This can be 2 words or 1 word? Give me
all
2
right,
words.
you can have 2. Words. What's that?
2 small words.
2 small words, yeah.
All right. I put be kind.
Yeah.
How about
that? That sounds right about your pace, Greg. I just, we thought it was so important to get you interviewed, because there's so many folks doing amazingly positive things in our community, and nobody knows anything about them. They're not looking for fandom. They're not looking for glory. They just have, maybe they have an itch they want to scratch, or maybe they just have been instilled that you give back. And you are the epitome of that. And I'm just so grateful that you were willing to come on today and talk with us. And I can't wait to share some whiskey with you. But I think we do have a couple of questions from, or at least one. Yes, Shelby?
Yes, we have one question here. What types of marketing strategies are you using to launch Hayner whiskey?
Good question.
All right, so perfect. We are interviewing social media companies. So one thing I will admit I am not good at is social media management. And so a lot of our advertisement is going to be social media. So we're interviewing companies actually right now. We hired a company to do our merchandising and logo. Interesting, I hate to say this, I had to go outside the community for that. We had a company in Canada actually. They specialize in alcohol branding, and so they're doing our branding images for us for Hayner. We'll have samples of that to show hopefully within this month. But as far as marketing, it's going to be social media, and if somebody out there knows a good company, we've talked to a couple, we need to talk to more, and that we're trying to stay local because you want to sit down with the person and develop that marketing and develop that imagery and your whole branding. And I like to be able to sit across the table from somebody, so we're trying to stay local with that part of the business.
It looks like Jason added to this. When is the anticipated launch? I don't know if I know Jason, but you might want to talk with Jason.
We won't be in the state stores until April, so we won't be. But we hope to have bottles to sell by the end of the year. That's our hope, is by the end of the year. Although we won't be in state, so we'll probably do a local soft launch, and then April will be our huge launch. We'll be in state liquor stores. In the state of Ohio, liquor is controlled by the state, and then you only buy it from state liquor stores. You can't go to Kroger's and or any place else to buy liquor other from the state. So in our city, it's Needler's. It's called Needler's. I think it's called Needler's. Oh, it used to be Marsh's, right? Now it's just a whiskey store. And in Tip City, Miami Valley Spirits.
That's awesome. Any other questions that you're seeing there, Shelby?
I think that's all we have.
Okay. Well, again, Greg, thank you so much for jumping in on this interview, and I am seriously excited. I really like whiskey, I like bourbon, and I love the history of Troy and Hayner. So I'm so happy that you decided to take this endeavor.
Yeah, we're excited too, and we want to get the word. We're kind of holding back. It's tough to hold back because you've got this product. You know it's coming, but we're a little too early to really start the big push on this. That's probably going to be late October. We start the media push, and the media releases will start sometime in October. But yeah, we're going to have a rather large launch party if COVID allows us to. Right, we'll have a large launch party, and it hopefully we'll get the good word out there about it.
Well, we got some special inside information in today, Greg, and I appreciate you jumping on. And if anybody has questions for Greg afterwards, Greg, is there a best way to get in contact with you?
Email is greg@haynerdistilling.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Greg, and thanks everybody for jumping on. Shelby will make sure to get this recorded video up on the YouTube and share that link to everybody. So if anybody thinks that they could pass this along to somebody who'd be interested in hearing some of the things that were discussed, please do so. And again, thank you, Young Leaders of Miami County, for producing the interview.